If you track global panic back to a single location, you usually end up at the Strait of Hormuz. Every day, roughly 20% of the world's oil moves through this narrow strip of water, making it the most significant maritime choke point on Earth. When supply here is threatened, governments across Europe and Asia scramble into emergency meetings. The general consensus is that a total closure of the strait would bring the global economy to a standstill. This fear is rooted in the economic landscape of the early 2000s. At that time, the United States relied on foreign imports for 60% of its petroleum consumption. Back then, Middle Eastern instability created an immediate energy shock for the U.S. Prices spiked, inflation surged, and the American economy entered a forced pause. That version of the world no longer exists. Over the last 2 decades, the energy trade has flipped entirely. A disruption in the strait today creates an asymmetric shock. It is no longer a universal crisis. Instead, the damage is determined by geographic positioning and domestic production capacity. The shift was driven by a massive domestic shale boom. New drilling techniques unlocked massive reserves across the entire country, allowing the United States to systematically reduce its reliance on foreign oil. Today, the United States is the largest oil producer in the world. This status changes the fundamental math of a Middle Eastern crisis. For the U.S., a strait disruption is primarily a price problem. Global supply cuts cause costs to rise at American pumps, straining consumers. But those same high prices generate immediate revenue for American energy companies, increasing the value of every domestic barrel produced. The advantage extends to natural gas. The U.S. has recently become the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. This puts the U.S. in a position to replace lost Middle Eastern supplies. Market reactions illustrate this shift. Exporters like Venture Global saw stock jump 40%, while Cheniere Energy climbed 15%. Investors are betting on American supply. While high prices pinch the American consumer, the massive capital inflows from global energy exports offset the domestic damage. For the U.S. economy, global scarcity effectively functions as a massive net positive revenue stream. To see the real threat, look east. 75% of the oil moving through the strait is destined for Asian nations like China, India, Japan, and South Korea. China alone requires 11 million foreign barrels daily, with a massive portion passing directly through this bottleneck. Unlike the U.S., China faces a physical volume crisis. If the massive oil tankers stop moving, the fuel required to power their industrial base simply disappears from the market. When physical supply disappears, factories slow, energy is rationed, and industrial output stalls. This is a massive structural threat to an economy that runs entirely on a constant, uninterrupted flow of imported energy. China has attempted to hedge this risk by diversifying its suppliers, with imports from Russia and Brazil, while building up its own strategic reserves. These hedges only buy time. A prolonged blockage of the strait would eventually exhaust those reserves, pushing China's economy toward a structural breaking point that its manufacturing sector cannot survive. We are seeing a crisis that generates profit for the United States while threatening the basic stability of China's industrial economy. This disparity creates a new form of diplomatic leverage. As the U.S. and China move through high-stakes negotiations on tariffs and supply chain decoupling, the vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz dictates the level of pressure each side can exert. When one nation can absorb a shock that devastates its primary rival, that event ceases to be a mutual problem. It becomes a strategic tool used to force concessions at the bargaining table. This energy disparity informs every other aspect of the superpower relationship. The ability of the U.S. to maintain its domestic economy during a global crisis gives it the endurance to maintain aggressive trade and technology restrictions. The Strait of Hormuz now functions as a choke point for power, where the flow of energy determines which nation has the security to lead the global economy in the 21st century.